I want to share three metaphors, three ways of thinking about what we're going to do together that you'll hopefully find useful. And the first one is the idea that doing this program is more like going on vacation than it is like going to school. So if you go to school and you study something, you take notes, and you're essentially a researcher, and you're trying to collect data, and you'll go back and evaluate the data later and look for ways to apply the data later. This is going to be much more like going on vacation. And if you go on vacation, you don't take notes, you have experiences. And the value of that is you don't need to kind of check your notes to remember what you did. You probably remember the highlights of every vacation you've ever been on, or at least if prompted, if somebody says, hey, tell me about that time you went to Rome, you're like, oh God, let me tell you about this and that. And in the same way, as you go through this program, I'm going to encourage you to go through it as an explorer, not a researcher. As somebody going to territory that maybe you've been to before, but you've never seen in the same way, or maybe you're going to go to places you've never been before. And that's going to be really helpful to you because, again, there's no pressure on you when you're going on vacation. There's no pressure to remember anything. You're not trying to kind of take notes on what the guide says. You're just having an experience. And the great thing about it is the experience that you have is yours for life. And in the same way, if you just kind of come along with me, let me be your guide on this vacation, then you're going to see things you've never seen. You're going to be amazed by seeing things about human beings where you've seen it 1,000 times, but you've never seen the principle behind it. And another way of thinking about that is what you're really looking to get from this are insights, not information, right? You can go back over this program as many times as you like. And so if there's any information that you need, you can find it again. But what you see for yourself, an insight, a sight from within, that's yours to keep. And your impact with clients is going to be based both on the insights you've had into how human beings work and the principles behind human functioning, and your clients' insights into their own experience. So you don't need a lot of information, you don't need a lot of data. You just need to actually have some experience of what it is to be a human being, which I'm assuming you bring with you, and have some principles that help explain that experience. Now, the second metaphor is I want you to imagine that you're able to go back in time. So you've got a time machine. And in your time machine, you take the coolest things we've got from our time back to, let's say, the 18th century. And so maybe you bring back some advances in medicine, maybe you bring back a New York pizza, maybe you bring back just the most helpful and most interesting things from now to the past. Now, when you do that, you would expect that a lot of people would just go, oh, what else have you got? And they would, every time you show up in your time machine, they'd be wanting the new goodies that you brought them back from the future. But the people who really kind of saw what was on offer would be far more interested in the time machine than they were what the time machine carried. Well, the people who were really, really getting what was on offer, they'd actually want to come back to the future with you. They'd actually want to see what it is that you see, where it is that you live, what it is that you know, so that they could essentially have that for themselves, not just the offshoots of it. They could actually experience an advanced technology. They could experience life with things that previously were unimaginable to them. Well, in the same way, what we're offering as coaches by looking to principles, not output, by looking to what's upstream, not downstream, is we're offering our clients a chance to see what's there before all the problems that they've got. What's there before all the psychology that they think they have to wade through? What's, if you want to use a Wizard of Oz analogy, what's behind the curtain what's really going on behind the scenes. And the reason that's so powerful is because it's universal. So while on the one hand, part of the art of coaching is really connecting to people on an individual basis, on a personal basis, the science is the fact that all human beings are operating from the same universal principles. So there's one more metaphor I want to share with you, and it kind of speaks to that notion of going upstream. And you may have heard this story. It's a teaching story that exists in a lot of traditions. But the story is that there was a river in ancient China, and people would, for whatever reason, and nobody really knew, they would drown in the river. And it was sort of one of those horrible things that's been going on for so long that everyone just accepts it. But there was a man who lived in a village downstream, and he decided not to accept it, and he went in and he started rescuing people, pulling people out of the river. And he couldn't get to all of them, but he felt like, well, I'm making a difference to this person. And eventually he actually got other people to help because they saw what he was doing. And it was a full-time job because there were so many people who would drown in that river that even with all the people doing what they did, they could never rescue everybody. And they tried, and they sort of reconciled themselves to the fact that they were doing their best. And one day the man who first went in to rescue the people disappeared. And nobody knew what had become of him, and they kept trying to rescue whoever was in the river, and they sort of figured he'd burned out. They sort of figured that he'd lost heart, that he'd gotten to the point where he realized it was futile, that no matter how many people he rescued, he was never going to be able to rescue all of them. And they kind of went, "No, well, we understand, but we're strong. We can keep rescuing everybody." And then one day, there was no one drowning in the river. And they went to the river the next day, and there was no one drowning in the river. And they went to the river the next day, and the next, and the next. And eventually they stopped going to the river every day because there was no one drowning in the river. And a year later, the original man, the first one who'd had that impulse to really save the people in the river, came back. And they were thrilled to see him and thrilled to kind of show him, look, since you've been gone, the river's dried up. The river still flows, but there are no people drowning in the river anymore. And the man says, "I know. I went upstream because I figured that they must be falling into the river somewhere. And if I figured I could find where they were falling into the river and stop them from doing that, we wouldn't need to spend so much time rescuing them." Well, what we're going to be doing in this program is we're going to be looking as far upstream as we can. We're going to be looking towards the source of human behavior, the source of creativity, the source of innovation, the source of high performance. And we're also going to be looking at the source of problems, the source of challenges, the source of stress, the source of pressure. Because the further upstream we go, the more able we are to stop people from getting into trouble and help them launch themselves on their way.